Hello, this is Dr. Paul Cottrell, and I'm going to be talking about updates on our episode number 8 of Coronavirus War Room. So, first on the docket, I am now a little bit more organized, and we'll call our little headquarters Pirates Cove. But at Pirates Cove, we're going to be talking about Operation Warp Speed. Okay, this came out yesterday. This is dealing with the fast tracking of vaccines, and the President of the United States has kind of galvanized industry to speed up the development of vaccines. Now, here's the problem that I have. The experts are saying maybe January where it'll be available. All right. Normally it takes a year and a half if everything goes well. Well, they've been working on this vaccine since, let's say, February. Okay. So at best, if you use standard safety protocols, the vaccine would not be normally available until July of next year, not January. Now, remember what I said earlier on a few episodes. Maybe it was episode 1 of the War Room. I said that the president is going to be forced, if there's a second wave, to do an executive order to force a vaccine program. So this is an element of it. All right. He's using his powers as president to fast track a vaccine program. Well, how do we know that it's safe? If you normally test for a year and a half instead of about a year. It just seems as though you're cutting corners in that it perhaps will lead to some sort of negative externality down the road, some sort of vaccine issue, some sort of vaccine injury, or it just doesn't work. I mean, how could he just say, I'm going to have it by January? So this is a problem that we need to really think about. And this idea that it's warp speed, and is it using the messenger RNA platform that Fauci's been, advertising? No, I hopefully it's not, but I think it is. I think it is the messenger RNA platform. I don't know. And I haven't heard a lot about distributed bio, which is the antibody version of the vaccine. So it seems as though Moderna is gaining momentum to pushing this vaccine. So I stated that if we have a second wave, which I think we will, in October, that it will force people to go back into shelter in place and force the president to do some sort of push for forced vaccines and cut corners on safety protocols. I think you're seeing that in a slow rollout through warp speed, Operation Warp Speed. So I think that the advisors are thinking there is going to be a second wave, and that it's giving President Trump some cover where he said, well, I've already initiated vaccines to be given in January, and it doesn't affect his reelection because it's not going to be forced in October. It'll be forced after the election, probably in January. But we'll see here. So I'm concerned about that, this warp speed, and what is the vaccine? If it's the messenger RNA platform, that's a new platform, and we don't have a lot of long-term testing on it. And I've been stating for a long time I'm very worried about that vaccine program. And Fauci's totally involved in it, and everything that Fauci touches seems to be suspicious. Secondly, I want to go over some of the markets here. remember on my last episode of Coronavirus War Room, where I was analyzing the markets, we do have a little bit of a downtick in the market today. And on the SPY, we're down about we're down and trading at about 290. And I was telling you that we were going to bounce off of the on the 61% retracement. Well, we did bounce right off of the 61% retracement. So individuals that are a little bit more on the professional side of trades, today might be a little bit of a opportunity to put some cash into the market if you're trading ETFs. Maybe tomorrow. You might have another down day tomorrow, and then it'll start to tick back up and test the 61% retracement. I think it will go up. All right. But again, this is only for professional traders, not for the average investor. The average investor still has to wait until October, because I want you to have cash on hand just in case there is a reinfection and you don't know if you get laid off again, or maybe you don't even go back to work. And it's better to have cash than to lose it potentially in the market. That's why I said the average person should not go in the market. Only professional traders in this, where they have to trade based on their fiduciary responsibility. All right. So that did take place. So that prediction took place. Oil is trading, the June futures contracts trading at 18, around 18. So it's going a little bit up. All right. I've also noticed that Gush, which is a leveraged ETF that I look at quite a bit and have traded quite a bit, that is also going up. Now, USO has been having some difficulty lately, and they had to restructure their ETF. And USO is a very, very popular ETF for oil, for WTI. And today it's up relative to the last 2 days. It's trading at about 19 now. So that's a good sign. So there's a little bit of a barrel of oil going up, a little bit of the USO non-leveraged ETF going up. Gush, which is leveraged, is going up. So I'm still concerned though, when you're looking at the oil plays where you have wildcatters, oil explorers, the oil and gas industry, they had to take out loans. And if they are not meeting their fixed costs, then they're not going to be able to pay. They're not going to be able to pay their loans. So the banks are going to be exposed to this type of phenomena that's taking place with the wildcatters in the oil industry, and even some of the larger players like Chesapeake and these I'll call them mid-range players. They also have to have a certain barrel of oil to break even. Well, that's not happening. Not at $18 a barrel. All right. So they're going to be stressed, and there's going to be defaults on their commercial paper or problems with paying loans back. So the banks are going to be exposed to the oil industry, and this is why there needs to be stabilization of the WTI, the oil commodity for the United States. Now, there's a lot of different wars going on. I'm going to step back and look at this philosophically. There's obviously the virus war, right? The war on our bodies, all right? There is this geopolitical play between the United States and China. There's this oil play war between the United States, Saudi Arabia, and Russia, all right? Russia and Saudi Arabia are trying to gain market share, but also driving the price down to try to weaken the United States, because we were the largest energy producer. All right, people don't really understand that we became the largest energy producer in the world. All right, and Saudi Arabia doesn't like that, even though we back Saudi Arabia. So there's this weird positioning geopolitically between Saudi Arabia and the United States, between Russia and Saudi Arabia, between China and the United States, and how China is positioning itself with Iran. So there's a geopolitical war going on, all right? And then there is this sovereignty war that I encapsulate in the terms of the Biopatriot Act. These are things that we really need to explore more. Yes, there's other components within the genome to explore, different homologies to take a look at, different receptors. Those are important. But the next big shift in talking about this subject is this geopolitical play, is the financial play, is how our wealth and our job opportunities eroding. That needs to be explored more. Now, in terms of the 10-year bond, which is another bellwether that I look at, that's trading at about 0.59% as of this filming. And I don't feel comfortable with the 10-year bond until it's at about 1.2 or 1.3% yield. So when you start, approaching the 0.45%, that's dangerous territory for the 10-year bond. So that just shows an indication that the Federal Reserve still has to come in and give a lot of liquidity into the market. So I still think that a lot of that mean reversion that's taking place in the market, even though it'll continue, that is hot money from the Federal Reserve. All right, and that's not the real economy. The real economy, all right, so this dovetails into what has happened in the last 2 days. Well, we have a negative 4.8% GDP annualized. That's terrible. We'll have another negative number, and that'll put us in a recession officially. All right, but we're talking about 30 million people laid off. 30 million people laid off. That's not good. That is not good. Now, a good percentage of them will go back at some point in time, but different states have different policies on how they're going to roll out these reboots, all right, of the economy. So no one really knows how fast and when the 30 million people will go back to work. And there's going to be a certain percentage of them that aren't going to be going back to where they left, because those companies are going to be strained with cash flow. And it's not like they're going to just snap their fingers. They lost revenue. They lost revenue for at least 2 months. Maybe, and it's going to take time to heal, and their revenues aren't going to just snap right back to where they were. So you're talking about probably 6 months or more for things to start stabilizing in terms of making sure that flow of revenue and cash are going back to quote normal. It's going to take a while. It's not going to be, I just go back to your job and everything's going to be the same. Most people that are going to go back to their job, I wouldn't be surprised that those companies cut people's salary or cut people's wages, because they're not going to have the cash flow. So it's not going to be a normal situation where it's just, we had a snowfall and we've been locked in our home for 1 or 2 days. It's not like that. This is totally different. All right. So people need to start thinking about that. Now, I've been listening to the market today, and there were 2 individuals. One was from Qualcomm and one was for Xbox. And the Qualcomm CEO, his stock's up about 1%, 1.1% today. he had somewhat of a positive outlook because they make chips for cell phones. So the OEMs are, the cell phone makers are still planning on building phones. Okay, but you got to remember the pipeline here. They make a chip, they buy the chip or chips, and Apple or some other phone maker needs that type of technology in their phone, and then they got to build it out and they got to sell it. Okay, that's kind of like the supply chain, in very simplistically. So Qualcomm's saying that the OEMs, they don't envision a big hit to their revenue. So that's why their stock's up a little bit. So they're optimistic at the manufacturing level. But how many phones are going to be sold when there's 30 million people that are laid off? All right. We are going to be going back to work, but how many people miss their car payment or miss their home payment or, are behind on some bills? It's going to take time to pay back those missed bills and then start buying things again. All right, so I'm not so sure that people are going to go and buy durable goods or electronics in the near future, like the next 3 months. I don't believe it. I think in the next 3 months, people are going to be so happy that they have a job and they can put food on the table and they can pay their mortgage that they're not going to be worried about if they're going to buy a laptop or a cell phone. So I disagree with the CEO from Qualcomm in terms of the OEM selling a product to the customer. The Xbox users have really radically went up. Well, that's obvious because everyone's sheltering in place. But how many people are going to be buying new games, and how many of those creators, those game creators, are going to invest for new games in the near term? There's probably going to be a little bit of a shortage of that, and maybe cut back on their pipeline in making these games. But I guess they have a subscription. I think they call it Pass. I don't have an Xbox, so I think it's something like Member Pass or something like that. So users have increased by about 130% in March, or since March. And so that's good for Xbox. But once we start going back to work, a lot of those gamers aren't going to be gaming as much. So this is a fleeting thing, in my opinion. Plus, there's a bigger point here. Once we get out of shelter in place, we've been housed in our homes for so long, we're going to desire to get out and be outdoors. We're not going to be wanting to be around in the house with technology. We're going to want to see trees and we want to be outside. So this idea that everyone is going to be gamers now, I think is ridiculous. There may be a section of society, maybe about 10 to 20%, that are fearful to be out. They'll go outside, but they're fearful, so they'll stay indoors for a little longer. And we saw that right after 9/11, that TV sales increased, home movie viewing increased. People didn't go to the theater, the big screen theater. So a similar dynamic might happen for the next 2 or 3 months. But eventually that will be fleeting. So I'm not sure that this is a long-term thing for Xbox. I doubt it. But that's just me. Maybe it's generational. I'm not sure. In terms of federalism versus states' rights, there was a good episode on War Room Pandemic by Steve Bannon and his crew talking about federalism and state rights. So the way the Constitution works is this. States have states' rights, all right? And states can do certain things, but there is a level of control by the federal government. So this was kind of like that battle between Hamilton and Jefferson back in the day, all right? And Hamilton was a Federalist. And he was saying, well, for the country to be cohesive and to be growing, that federalism would be a better solution. This is part of the reason why he had the U.S. Central Bank at the time and the coordination of manufacturing. While Jefferson was more, it should be states' rights and we should be more agricultural. So it was a battle not only between states' rights and federal rights back then, but it was also, is the country going to be industrial versus agricultural? And that was the battle that was happening. Hamilton won the battle in this, or the argument in this regard. But Steve Bannon's crew is saying, well, we need federalism right now because you have a lot of state governors that are doing their own thing and it needs to be coordinated and a lot of them are against Trump. So federalism is better because it's a crisis situation and the commander-in-chief should have more control. I'm kind of like in the middle here in the sense. I understand the importance of states' rights. And we have to prevent the ability of the Federalists to being infiltrated by the New World Order to institute top-down government. So that was kind of like, at a philosophical level, if the governors listen to its citizens, states' rights states' rights are very important. The problem is that you got a bunch of governors that are so, they are so anti-Trump, that they hate Trump so much that states' rights don't work because they do things to try to they don't care about the citizens. They are doing things to try to pull down his presidency. So this is kind of like the framing that Steve Bannon is doing on War Room Pandemic. He says he's focused on federalism because of the problems that we're having with the Democratic Party with trying to just pull down Trump instead of trying to save the nation. So that's another war that's going on in this country. It's this Democrat versus Republican bullshit. Or socialism versus capitalism. And capitalism is better. It's got its problems and it needs to be somewhat reformed, especially with big banks need to be cut down through a trust bust. But the Democrats are pushing socialism, and socialism will destroy this country. So we need the president to exercise some of his executive authority, but to walk a fine line and still preserve states' rights. Because states' rights are important. If the governors actually listen to its citizens, but they're not. They're listening to their party. And the citizens and their party are saying two different things. All right? So I understand where Steve Bannon is going with this. But it's a battle, and we need to understand that there is a need for executive privilege, especially in crisis situations. But not all of his decisions, not all Donald Trump's decisions are good. And I think this warp speed operation with vaccines is a perfect example where it's not good. Now, in terms of deaths in the United States, so just a quick update. We have 1,042,874 confirmed cases of COVID-19 that have been tested. We have a lot more than that, all right? We're in the millions in terms of how many people actually have COVID-19 or had COVID-19, right? Far majority are benign, and this is why the death rates are going down, all right? Total deaths are 61,123 in the United States. Now, to put that into context, all right, because it's important, because a lot of people think, oh, it's just the flu. It's not the fucking flu, all right? But I'll get to that, all right? But to put it into context, in the last 2.5 months, we have lost more people in the last 2.5 months than we lost in combat losses in Korea, in Vietnam, and World War I. World War I, we lost in combat 53,000 people. In Vietnam, we lost 47,000. And in Korea, we lost 33,000. So if you think it's the flu, you take that 61,000 that died from this and shove it up your fucking ass. New York City alone, which is just the 5 boroughs of about 8.6 million people, we have lost 18,000. Now think about that. That's more than half in 2.5 months than we lost in the Korean War. Think about that. Now, we're approaching the number of deaths in the United States. We'll reach we'll reach much higher numbers, okay? But we're approaching how many combat deaths in the Civil War for the Confederate Army, which was 75,000 combat deaths. There were more deaths because of wounded, but combat deaths, 75,000 Confederate soldiers died during the Civil War in the United States. And we're at 61. We're going to hit that. We're going to go way beyond that. Now, the U.S. Army lost 140,000 in the Civil War. All right? So those are some metrics to kind of put things into consideration. And those were wars that lasted 4 years or longer. All right? The second most high deaths for the United States is Wayne County, Michigan. And that is 1,727. So what did we learn about these data points? Okay? Well, very high density areas like New York, where I think that they actually made some mistakes in terms of trying to contain it. They were a little late to the party. Very high, 17,000, 18,000 deaths. That's too much. That's too many deaths. That's way too many deaths. In your area in the United States, it's probably going to be in the range of 1,000 to 2,000. All right? But there's a lot of areas in the United States. So when you aggregate that all, it's going to be a lot of people that die. All right? I have 4 case models, epidemiological case models and financial models that are tied to some assumptions. I'm going to be updating that for May 1st. Okay? I'm not these types where I'm updating my model all the time. All right? I'm just capture it at the beginning of the month, and I do a new one at the beginning of the next month. So to see which case was closer. And I'm adjusting to see the prediction of what's going on here. So I'll be doing an update of my epidemiological models for everyone, and I'll talk about it on an episode of Coronavirus War Room. So with that said, the overall theme here with the financial markets, when they were talking to some economists, some analysts on CNBC, is that they believe that the worst in the United States is near or past its peak. Kind of the worst is over, okay? That's assuming that we don't get reinfected between being released from shelter in place and the end of the year. Markets are going up because of this assumption and because of some of the positive news that's coming out for Remdesivir, for Gilead. Gilead is also a potential play for professional investors. But if something doesn't work with Gilead, you could lose a lot of money too. So it's high risk. It's idiosyncratic. I don't like putting money into idiosyncratic situations. I prefer trading macro markets, not micro markets. But they're not discounting for a potential problem. So they're taking best case here. Best case is no reinfection and that there is a therapeutic. Okay? So that's an overall kind of theme that has been moving around the talking heads for CNBC. All right? So maybe I should kind of like talk about what's my perspective between mortality and morbidity, okay? People get things confused, okay? So we have to go back to definitions, all right? Mortality, the mortality rate is when people die, okay? And there is an acute phase and there is a chronic phase. And everyone was focused on the chronic phase. I'm sorry, the acute phase, where it's like now, all right? What's happening now? It's not the chronic. So everyone's focused on the acute. So mortality, the mortality rate, or the death rate, is what a lot of people are focused on. They're saying it's not very high relative to the number of people that are infected. And there are many more people that are infected than the tests are showing, right? So that mortality rate, or death rate, I prefer calling it the death rate, but the mortality rate is much lower. So people would say, well, it's not a problem. Wrong. All right? But there is some hope, all right? Now, let's take a look at, there's mortality with chronic. We don't know what the chronic situation of this disease is. It's an unknown because it's a neurological disease, that's a fact. It is a pulmonary disease, that's a fact. And it is a blood disease, a fact, right? Not speculation. The tissues that are being infected are neurological, pulmonary, and blood, and your immune system. Now, when you are starting to affect your blood, your red blood cells, and your T cells, you're going to have some weird diseases that we normally don't see, especially with the T cells. And I am concerned because of the infection of SARS-CoV-2 getting into T cells through the CD147 pathway, maybe others, but it's affecting the T cells. And those T cells go into G0 and don't divide. Do we have a dormancy that takes place with this? And down the road, we start seeing a flare-up? So in AIDS, that's caused by HIV-1. AIDS is the disease. HIV-1 is the virus. That has an acute phase, about 6 months, 3 to 6 months, and then in a chronic phase where it's years before you die. Now, most people don't realize that the people that were dying in 1984, 85, they contracted HIV at approximately 1974 to 1975. So that's a data point. And that affected the T cell. Now, we don't understand, because this is a bioweapon, all of the little things that they put in it. But we do know this. It attacks our ACE2. It attacks the CD147. It attacks the CD209. It attacks the 299 and the CD299. And it attacks the GRP78. Right? There are multiple receptors, so it can pinball. It can gain function. It can go dormant. And these are the people that don't understand that just because you don't have acute mortality, they're thinking, the ones that don't think rationally, they're thinking that, well, we don't have a problem. Well, no, we do have a problem. But that doesn't mean that we hide. That doesn't mean that we are scared. We will solve this problem. There are ways to get around the problem. Because I'm an engineer, all right? I believe that whatever the problem is, there's an answer, all right? If it's pollution, there's an engineering problem to solve the pollution. If we have a weapon that is affecting our T cells that may give us AIDS-like syndrome in 5 to 10 years, there is an engineering solution. But you have some people out there that say just because the mortality rate is low, then we don't have a problem. But most of these people that are saying this, they either don't have a medical background, they don't have or they don't have a scientific background, or they don't even have a math background. Most of the people that are saying this are and expound, on the internet, are liberal arts majors. So they don't. It's a problem, all right. There are some doctors that are stating that they're more worried about E7 than the virus. Well, I concur, but I concur for different reasons. They're looking at it that the acute isn't as bad as they thought it would be. They have no idea what the long-term effects are with an AIDS-like syndrome that has a high possibility because of the HIV homology and the attack of the T cell. The E7 is more dangerous than the virus because E7 is going to erode your civil liberties even faster than this virus. There's two viruses going on here. There's one that's a biological one with maybe multiple strains. And then there's E7 that's permeating into the society for a mega surveillance. So it's important to understand and look at the acute side of this and the chronic side. And we had just begun this journey in this world with this bioweapon that they should have never made. And it's not just the CCP, it's also the US. And people that were involved at all levels across the world need to be put on trial for crimes against humanity because they messed around with something they should have never done. And it's destroying wealth and it's destroying the health of the world. But don't be afraid. So people think, oh, you're being a fearmonger, Paul, or you're a social engineer. I don't know what the fuck a social engineer is. I know what a real engineer is because I was an automotive engineer. I know what that means. But social engineer, I don't know what the fuck that means. What I do think is happening is that we have a very unknown going on when it comes to the chronic phase of this. And we have to be vigilant. But that doesn't mean that we are scared because we are Americans and we'll find a way. We will find a way. That is the American spirit. That's what that flag is. That flag right there. That's what that means. Don't be a pussy. Be adventurous. Explore. Grow. Don't say you can't do something. Just say, I will find a way. That's what that flag means. But these people that say, oh, the virus isn't that bad because the death rates are so low and there's going to be so many people that have contracted COVID-19, therefore we don't have a problem. No, we do have a problem because we don't know what the unknown is because it is affecting your T cells. And hopefully it just dies out and it attenuates and it's not a problem, which is a possibility. But we know it's a bioweapon. And when you think that if you're designing a bioweapon, that you would have an acute phase and a chronic phase to weaken your enemy, don't you think you would have that in the arsenal? But people say, well, Paul, if you say these things, then you're creating fear, and people won't want to go back to work. No, I'm saying, look at that flag Remember the number of people that died in Korea, the number of people that died in Vietnam, the number of people that died in World War I and World War II, and in the Middle East, and all the other wars that we fought in this country, and the revolution. And say, no, we are moving forward, even if there is a problem over the horizon, because we will find a way, because that is what that flag represents. So these people that say that I'm social engineering, no, I'm not socially engineering. All right? What I am saying, though, is this. You erode our constitutional freedoms, and I will find a way to burn down this goddamn country. I will find a way to make sure we protect this Constitution. And anyone that gets into my way, I will roll them over. Nothing's going to stop me. Nothing. Because that flag and our Constitution is the most important thing that we have, that we must preserve for our children. So people say, don't be fearful. You're going to create fear and people are going to cause panic. Well, you know what? It's time to fight. It's time to fight for our freedoms and not have this never-ending tyranny. Now, if you want to call that social engineering, then go right fucking ahead. What I call it is being patriotic. Thank you for listening and have a nice day.